Hey there, working listeners. Before we start the show, I want to let you know about a story coming up a little later. It's from one of our partners, SAP. Is your business reaching an exciting turning point? Are you ready to seize the moment for growth? Well, when you're facing tough decisions, SAP can help you be ready for anything that happens next. To learn more, head to sap.com/be-ready. And stick around to hear how the president of an esports league seized the moment.
Welcome to Working Overtime, the adorably resourceful short round to Working's intrepid Indiana Jones. I'm your host, Nate Chinen.
And I'm your other host, June Thomas. So Nate, what are we talking about today?
Well, June, here at the Chinen homestead, we recently geared up and summoned our courage and headed back to school.
Oof.
I have two daughters, ages 10 and 12, and I also spent some quality time recently with my niece and nephew who are in preschool and kindergarten, respectively. So I have been plugged into a lot of kid energy, and I thought we might harness that in this episode.
Ooh.
So, yeah, I know Working Overtime has actually touched on the balancing act of parenting while pursuing a creative practice. I listened to an episode from December of 2022. But I'd like to check out the flip side of that coin. How can we learn from the ways that children express their creativity? What are the elements of a childlike imaginative practice that can inform and deepen your work, whether you yourself are a parent gingerly stepping over a pile of Legos, or maybe you've already made it across the line and raised a family, or perhaps you are someone who has never had kids and probably never will.
This is going to be interesting for me because as a childless only child, I am one of those people who has very few kids in their life. So I have a lot to learn from this.
Well, in some ways, June, you hit the jackpot. And that makes you a perfect conversational partner for this episode, because I really don't want this to be a parent talking to fellow parents. But, I want to take a moment to shout out a real role model. Last month, I flew out to Los Angeles to attend an all-star tribute and memorial service for the composer and saxophonist Wayne Shorter, who died in March at age 89. He was just an absolute giant of American music, a modern jazz icon, a real towering influence, and a source of truly endless inspiration. I wrote his obituary for the New York Times, and one thing that I made sure to mention was his constant exhortation to stay in touch with the imaginative spark that you had as a child.
Wow.
He said you have to protect it. Now, there's a brand new 3-part documentary on Amazon Prime. It's called Wayne Shorter, Zero Gravity. And in the first part of this film, it addresses this idea quite explicitly. So I thought I'd cue up a clip from the film. The first voice that you will hear is the virtuoso electric bassist and composer and producer Marcus Miller. And the second voice belongs to trumpeter, composer, bandleader Terrence Blanchard.
I'd asked him, Wayne, what's the most important tool? And he said, your imagination, right? And I was telling Wayne that I kept that with me. But also, as I thought about it, equally as important as your imagination is your fearlessness to respect your imagination.
Art Blakey had the best comment about him I've ever heard. Art Blakey used to say he has the imagination of a child, which I find to be true because his imagination is limitless. He's a guy who is not bound by tradition at all.
Okay, now I want to go watch that documentary series. It sounds amazing. But what Terrence Blanchard just described, it feels like another way of expressing beginner's mind. There are lots of ways to approach that state, which is a little bit of a Jedi mind trick. As I understand it, you're trying to forget everything you know, all you have learned, and instead come to a project as an outsider, a blank canvas. It's almost about challenging yourself to enter a state of innocence every time you sit down to create, compose, play, whatever it is you do. Practically speaking, though, that's really, really difficult to actually do. So how did Wayne Shorter, the very definition of a virtuoso, maintain his sense of openness?
I think some of it was intrinsic to his character, and some of it was very carefully cultivated. When you mentioned beginner's mind, it so happens that Wayne Shorter, like Herbie Hancock and some others in the jazz community, was a practicing Buddhist and was very deeply involved in his practice as a Buddhist. And, the Buddhists, one of their key tenets is non-attachment. And you can apply that to this, incredible accumulation of knowledge that Wayne had as a musician. He went to college as a composition major. One of the last pieces that he introduced to the world was an opera, which I had the pleasure of seeing. And so he was just constantly exploring the various byways of the information that he'd gathered. But always, at every juncture, he was also willing himself to be open to just pure play and to the spirit that he so fondly remembered from his own childhood, and he grew up in a pretty, industrial circumstance in the ironbound section of Newark, but he always talked about that time with so much fondness. There was an empty lot near his house, like a weed-strewn lot, probably with some, discarded machinery in it.
Yeah.
And he talked about how after school every day, he and his brother would just turn that empty lot into, the surface of Mars or the moon or the Sahara Desert. And, just the constant reinvention and the sort of what if. And that was a characteristic that he really carefully preserved and protected in his own work, even when he was doing something as high-minded and difficult as composing an opera.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Wayne Shorter, excellent example of an accomplished artist refusing to put away childish things. We can clearly learn from him still. But might we also draw inspiration closer to the source?
June, I am so glad you asked, because when we come back, we'll take a look at a piece of very popular children's television programming and consider the truths it has to impart.
This podcast is brought to you by Slate Studios and SAP. How do you know when to seize the moment for growth? When your opportunity arrives, you need to be ready. From expanding into new markets to hiring, business leaders face so many tough decisions.
My name is Brendan Donahue, president of the NBA 2K League. The NBA 2K League is a professional esport run by the NBA and 2K, where we take 30 million people who play the game of NBA 2K and we find the best 125 in the world to compete in our league.
In March of 2020, the start of the pandemic spurred the league to take steps it never imagined. And with SAP tools, they knew they were ready.
We could have postponed our season like a lot of other sports leagues did. We decided to seize the moment. We created a competition that could be done virtually. We had the NBA 2K League on major sports networks for 17 weeks. That moment gave us a chance to talk to a mass audience across the world. So the majority of our fans, less than 1%, will ever step foot in an NBA arena to watch a game live. But you have this significant fandom and excitement for the game, and so that's really where we think we play a role. Our first season, we had 650,000 people watch our finals in season 1. Now our finals this past year, we had 2.2 million people watching.
NBA 2K League seized the moment for growth. Will you? Head to sap.com/be ready to learn more.
At the end of your first year, Discover credit cards automatically double all the cash back you've earned. That's right. Everything you earned doubled. All the cash back from eating at your favorite soup dumpling restaurant doubled. All the cash back from that trip where you sort of learned to snowboard also doubled. And the best part, you don't have to do anything ridiculous to get it. Nope, Discover does it automatically. Seriously though, see terms and check it out for yourself at discover.com/match.
Hey listeners, do you have any tips or questions about the creative process? Get in touch and maybe share your advice. You can email us at working@slate.com, or even better, you can call us and leave a message at 304-933 9675. That's 304-933-WORK. All right, now back to working overtime.
We're back. And now, June, I am going to put you on the spot. Somewhere amidst the oh-so-sophisticated and very Catholic cultural offerings that you imbibe, I wondered, have you ever seen an episode of Bluey?
Nate, the answer to your very flattering question is no, never. Nevertheless, I am very aware of the show. In fact, I think it might be the most praised piece of television of the last few years. Everyone who writes or tweets about it seems to absolutely unreservedly love it. Even the crabbiest critics just cannot hide their love of the show.
That does seem to be true. I mean, even Succession had a few doubters, right?
Right.
But everyone seems completely won over by Bluey. And I include myself in that number. I'll say that this is a show that on paper might seem to be a little too young for my own kids who just started 5th and 8th grades. But my younger daughter caught the bug maybe about a year ago. And soon our entire family was watching. And what we've responded to at the surface level is just an extremely fun and witty and well-made show that does what so little children's programming has ever managed, which is to capture something essential about childhood without dumbing it down, dressing it up, or taking anything, including itself, too seriously. Now, if you're listening right now as a parent of small children, I am not telling you anything that you don't already know, but you may even know this simply by virtue of prior coverage at Slate. I looked this up. Last year, the Mom and Dad Are Fighting podcast devoted an episode to Bluey titled Bluey Knows Best. And also last year at Slate.com, Philip Masiak, Philip, I apologize if that is not the correct pronunciation, but Philip wrote an endorsement that's also worth checking out. The headline of that piece is Why TV's Best Kids Show is Also Its Best Show About Parents. And because I think it points us in a helpful direction, I'm going to read a quote from that piece. Bluey is a children's television show happening inside of an adult dramedy about marriage, co-parenting, and middle age, starring Bluey and Bingo's parents, Bandit and Chili. As anyone who's seen any amount of the show will know, a large majority of episodes are built around some bizarre, complicated game that requires the intense involvement and deep commitment to the bit of one or both parents. The girls make up Byzantine, frequently sadistic rules, and Bandit and Chili follow them without question or hesitation. Philip adds, Bandit and Chili are prototypically thoughtful, measured, occasionally exasperated modern parents. Episodes are filled with boundary setting and engaged parenting. But when the games begin, Mom and Dad are entirely at the bidding of their children.
Wow. Okay, that is a very effective sell. There's a lot to like there. But I'm hearing a couple of alarm bells ringing over words like sadistic or the notion of anyone being at someone else's bidding. Talk me down, Nate. Defend this beloved show.
Well, this is one of those maybe Stockholm Syndrome moments because to be a modern parent is to be involved in a somewhat sadomasochistic relationship. You would do anything for your children. They know this on a certain level. They are not above exploiting it. And so that is part of the playfulness of the show. But there's also a really nuanced portrayal of that dynamic because the kids are learning from the example set by their parents, not only from their active, engaged play, but also from the moments when something gets redirected or a boundary does get put up for good reason, or when something like a death or other life difficulty actually enters the equation. So, it is lots of fun and games, this show, but I think what a lot of people have responded, and certainly the critics who like this show, have responded favorably to the fact that it doesn't sugarcoat everything, Wow. There's actually a lot of real life in the show.
Well, maybe we should hear an example of the show's imagination in action.
I consulted my girls about this, and yeah, they pointed me towards several fine episodes. I had seen them all before, but they sort of knew where to turn my attention. You know, there's been 3 seasons of the show. I think it's still underway, the 3rd season. But the one that suits our purposes best, I think, is from season 2. It's titled Escape. And the storyline adheres to a meta-narrative that's basically postmodern. Bandit and Chili, the healer parents, are dropping the kids off at Grandma's house so they can go have a little time to themselves. And during the car ride, the whole family engages in some totally impromptu verbal one-upsmanship, imagining how the parents will manage their escape from the kids, who are absolutely determined to catch up.
Oh no!
Get one, Bingo.
Okay.
We go down a secret tunnel to our underground base.
Which also has hammocks.
Well, we go down the tunnel too.
You can't. There's a manhole cover, which is locked.
Well, I get an axe and chop a hole in it.
It's made of metal. Your axe breaks.
What chops through metal?
Diamond?
Bandit, don't help them.
Sorry.
We use a diamond axe and chop through it.
Oh no!
Quick, time to bail. We get in the car.
Yeah, but a cool car. Let's go, let's go, let's go!
Bluey, let's get in the dream house car. Oh yeah!
What?
The dream house car. It's like a giant dream house on wheels. Yeah, it's got 11 burger shops and 20 bedrooms and 40 toilets and a spa on the balcony.
So as you can hear, this is a fiendishly simple premise, and it's one that almost any parent or former child, for that matter, should be able to relate to. You know, it's like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to do this. Well, I'm going to do this. But crucially, this also adheres to the famous dictum at the heart of improv comedy. Yes, and, right?
Yes. Yeah.
This is the methodology so central to the art of improv that the Chicago guru Del Close actually named his company Yes and Productions. And what it captures, I think, is the importance of suspending judgment as your wheels are spinning. You know, when you're not afraid of sounding totally ridiculous or going too far or what have you, you know, you can drop some real clunkers.
Yeah.
But maybe you also get to some interesting and inventive places.
Crikey. Bluey just absolutely sounds amazing. Definitely something else to add to my to-watch list. And I loved hearing those madly escalating flights of fancy. And that exercise reminds me of something that has come up in an art class that my partner is currently taking. Several times, the teacher has asked the class to do something experimental, where the explicit focus is on trying out new techniques rather than trying to make something that they will like. And apparently, a lot of the students are having trouble with that because it's hard for them to take their eyes off the destination and just enjoy the journey. They don't want to make something that they're not going to love, even though you can't guarantee ever that you will love where you get to, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's such a human instinct. And here's where I will, speaking of improv, right? Here's a callback. Somewhere around the turn of this century, Wayne Shorter formed a new band, the Wayne Shorter Quartet. And this was a band with pianist, bassist, and drummer who were all from a successive generation, you know, really wonderful musicians who grew up worshiping Wayne's body of work. And rather than lead this band as the wise elder and say, well, here's how we're going to do things, Wayne urged them, and in fact, sort of pushed them to invent, you know, sort of in a whole cloth fashion, even when they were nominally playing a piece of music that was familiar to them. And it was a really fascinating thing to watch. I saw this band, I don't know, maybe a dozen times. And I can tell you, there were times when I was in a concert hall watching them sort of swirl around a theme and like, you know, everybody is kind of trying to figure out where it's going. And you know, I promise you that if at any point any one of them had locked into a tune that people knew, you know, Wayne wrote some wonderful, iconic compositions. All they had to do was play the tune that people knew, and it would have been like massive pandemonium in the hall. But there was a refusal to go that route. And it was almost perverse.
Yes.
But it got them to this incredible depth of expression.
Wow.
And the mature life of this band, there was no other group I ever saw that had the level of communication that they did. And it was really because of that insistence on not going for, the easy route.
Wow. That's amazing.
And so back to Bluey and this episode, I think it's beautiful to see that not a single member of the Healer family in that car ever balks at any of the crazy suggestions tossed out by the others.
You're right.
It's this madcap chase. It keeps getting madder, even as certain rules of physics somehow manage to apply. And in that sense, it reminds me a little bit of the old Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote cartoons, but without the Looney Tunes undercurrent of nasty Darwinism.
Right.
Because, crucially, while Wile E. Coyote was trying to, catch and eat the Roadrunner, this here is a game being played by parents and small children. So all of that competitive escalation happens in this cocoon of love and togetherness,
Yeah.
Everybody knows Chili and Bandit aren't really trying to escape their children or their responsibilities, but even a much-needed break turns into a springboard for play. So when they finally do drop the kids off at Grandma's, there's a really lovely turn. Instead of doing their usual thing, settling in for some TV on the couch, Bluey and Bingo decide to spend their time drawing some of the outlandish scenes that they had just made up in the car. Oh. And so that moment is a reminder to anyone watching the show, and really to any of us, creativity is self-perpetuating. When you cultivate it, it grows.
Oh, wow. What an amazing story. I feel really quite verklempt, or as Bandit and Chili might say, full on, mate. Wow. I really will stop with the Australian accent now. I have to say, Nate, I really do see what you're getting at, because while Beginner's Mind asks us to let go of established roles and preconceptions, if you can combine that with the benefits of repetition and artistic mastery, the kind of skills that all those people in the Windshotter band clearly had, well, that's kind of the creative dream, right?
Right. Yeah, I think it is. We're mixing up our Australian television with our American jazz, but I will say that what you just said reminds me, so many people looked to Wayne Shorter as a guru, and one of his gurus was actually Miles Davis. And one of the things that Wayne told me he encountered when he began playing with Miles was that Miles would say they would be looking at the street and they'd see a woman in high heels and she tripped on the street. And Miles would say, play that.
Whoa.
And another thing that he said was, in the studio once, he told his band, I want you to play like you don't know how to play your instruments.
Yeah.
So that is not a literal exhortation.
Yes.
It's not like I want you to fumble around and not know how to get a note out.
Yeah.
But it's this idea of you have worked so hard to erect this sort of scaffolding of erudition and technique and knowledge and shortcuts, right?
Yeah.
And that has to be dismantled, because all of that is sort of in you already anyway. If you can clear all of that and just get to some kind of essence and be instinctual with, the thing that you do.
Yes.
That's actually the real stuff. I think that's really, really profound. It's something that I think about often. We'll be right back with some final childhood inspiration.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Hey listeners, whether you love true crime or comedies, celebrity interviews, news, or even motivational speakers, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue, right? And guess what? Now you can call the shots on your auto insurance too. Enter the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. The Name Your Price tool puts you in charge of your auto insurance by working just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, then they'll show you a variety of coverages that fit within your budget, giving you options. Now that's something you'll want to press play on. It's easy to start a quote and you'll be able to choose the best option for you fast. It's just one of the many ways you can save with Progressive Insurance. Quote today at progressive.com to try the Name Your Price tool for yourself and join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Hi all. Wondery's podcast Business Wars is back with an incredible season that you'll want to listen to. It's all over the news, but did you know that as early as the 2010s, the dream of artificial intelligence became real? The big tech companies knew they'd have to harness this technology if they were going to win the new AI race. In fact, it was key to their very survival. But researchers within each company would soon sound the alarm that if the tech giants moved too fast, the consequences could be devastating. Business Wars dives into some of the biggest corporate rivalries of all time. In their latest season, The Rise of AI, the tech behemoths fight to dominate the artificial intelligence space and reckon with the costs. Follow Business Wars wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen ad-free on the Amazon Music or Wondery app.
Okay, now, June, I would like to spin the wheel in your direction.
Oh.
Is there a childhood talisman or tradition or even a piece of children's entertainment that has inspired you to create or cogitate differently?
Okay, so I know that this is weird, but when I was a kid, the things I read about in books and fantasized about doing often involved adult careers. They were almost a form of adult cosplay. So let me give you a concrete example. I was always reading about school magazines, and I would dream, and very specifically, of writing, editing, and illustrating a school magazine. And, you know, I went to the village elementary school at the end of my street. We didn't have anything like that. But I was constantly trying to, you know, do that, to put something together. And whether or not I did, I guess the key there is that it never occurred to me that I couldn't or I shouldn't do such a thing. And, you know, check it out, decades later, here I was writing, editing, and podcasting for a living. So maybe that was, you know, the thing that set that thought in motion, you know, holding on to what you dreamed about as a kid. Yeah, that really can be very powerful.
Absolutely. You know, you can look at it a couple of ways. Either you were getting warmed up and, you know, and like starting to amass some of the skills that you now, you know, routinely deploy, or you were manifesting this this current reality. I like both options.
Yeah.
But it really does show, you know, you got something generative out of play. This is getting to the heart of one thing we're talking about in this episode, which is that we often think of work and play as, you know, these diametric opposites, right?
Yeah,
one is serious and one is not serious. But in fact, play can be intensely serious and work can actually be pretty silly. So it's about finding like where that equilibrium lives for you and for your work.
Oh, I love that.
Well, that is the end of playtime. It's all the time we have in this episode. But before we go, a reminder, please subscribe to Working wherever you get your podcasts. And if you have ideas for things we could do better or questions you would like us to address, we would love to hear from you. You can send us an email at working@slate.com or give us a ring at 304-933-WORK.
And if you would like to support what we do, sign up for Slate Plus at slate.com/workingplus. You'll get bonus content, including exclusive episodes of Decoder Ring and Big Mood, Little Mood, and you'll be supporting what we do right here on Working.
Thanks, as always, to Kevin Bendis and our series producer, Cameron Drews, who both always find a way to make working sound like child's play. We will be back on Sunday with a brand new episode. Until then, get back to work.
Hey everybody, it's Tim Heidecker. You know me, Tim and Eric, Bridesmaids, and Fantastic Four. I'd like to personally invite you to listen to Office Hours Live with me and my co-hosts, DJ Doug Pound.
Hello.
And Vic Berger.
Howdy.
Every week we bring you laughs, fun, games, and lots of other surprises. It's live. We take your Zoom calls.
Music.
We love having fun. Excuse me?
Songs. Vic said something.
Songs.
Music.
I like having fun. I like to laugh. I like to repeat. people who can make me laugh. Please subscribe now.